So I'm Steve, I'm a lieutenant with the Annapolis County Police, and I'm partnered with Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Corbin. I'm the director of our Arundel County Crisis Response, which is the mental health agency for the county that also runs our crisis system, which is 24 hours a day, but we're housed actually together. Our CIT is partnered with our mobile crisis and CIT.
So, June 28th last year, I just finished teaching a CISM course, and Jen calls me. It was the final day, the 3-day class, and we had, I think, 15 people in the class. As I'm leaving, she calls me and says, "Get out of class, come get me, because we have an active shooter in Annapolis Mall." And that's all I know at that point, until I get to where she's at. I get there, and my car is loaded with food from the training, so it looked like a NASCAR thing. Everyone comes running out, grabs everything out. Important thing, at that point, I'm throwing my ballistic vest on. She doesn't have a ballistic vest to throw on.
I'm a clinician, not an officer,
So down in the caravan of police to that 450 police officers between federal, state, and local Annapolis County officers were on that scene. Think about that, 450. Every acronym you can say in the federal government showed up. That is 888 Bestgate, where the incident happened. Actually, the newsroom is way in the back in that corner in the first floor. So it's really important to understand that we are a fully integrated unit. As in, she refers to me as her work husband. I get honey-do lists, I get put in place, but it's fully integrating mental health and law enforcement.
And we did it reverse, so instead of our clinicians, so we have mobile, which is 2 clinicians paired together on police radio who respond to calls every day. Mental health, homeless, whatever the officer needs help with, they can radio for one of our admin units, and 2 mental health clinicians go straight to them. But we also decided several years ago that there were calls that we were holding officers on because we were worried about safety. Plus, there were calls that needed follow-up where we were worried about safety, and just sending a clinician out there was not going to do, and that's kind of when we adopted the CIT Memphis model. But I didn't want to just train officers, I wanted to pair them with a clinician. I wanted it to be an approach where we could do that constant follow-up with severe cases. So our chief at the time was really into that and said, yep, and started letting me train away and actually gave a unit into our system. So instead of, in a lot of places, the social worker is housed in the police department, the officers are actually housed in crisis. 1, so they can access our records. They've all signed, the ones that are in our unit have signed HIPAA forms, and they understand that they are actually working with us under that auspices that they can't provide it to patrol unless they go through a clinician. So a lot of times now in our rules and regs for police, when he arrives on scene, the patrol officer step back because the CIT officer takes charge.
And it actually creates issues with command staff.
A lot.
Because command staff doesn't understand when I say, sorry, I can't tell you. Because they're like, well, I'm your boss, I'm the commander, and it's like, well, sorry, but in the community, I'm looked upon probably more as being crisis response than I am the police department. We're that integrated.
But it helps because it allows people who are working within the community to buy in and to trust us and to kind of see that work in progress.
So officers in the unit, it's myself and there's 4 patrolmen, corporals and patrolmen in the unit. They've had a lot of training. The 40, and I'm familiar with CIT, but they've all been through 40-hour CIT training. We run our own school. I'm proud, my boast, that we have a great school. Steve is one of our clinicians who actually is there running at the school, but the Secret Service now comes to our school from the White House. The Federal Protective Service comes to our training. Transportation Authority, Annapolis City, Fort Meade, the United States, the Coast Guard, Investigative Service. all come to our CIT training. Everyone, aside from mental health first aid, we were the first department in the nation to train every officer in mental health first aid. Our use of force dropped 21%, and it's gone up and down a little bit, but it's right there at the same level right after we trained. We started CIT and trained every officer. Plus, injuries to officers is down significantly, about the same, because officers are learning to de-escalate instead of.
Now I'm going to talk a lot about negatives of what we do or what happens, and I get criticized a lot as the director because I refuse to be that person who trains everybody in CIT for a checkbox, because Steve will tell you, him and I both train at the academy, try to send an officer in a 40-hour class that doesn't want to be there, and they're going to take the whole class down. So way back when we started CIT, we decided that mental health first aid is a good signs and symptoms for them to know when to call us, to give them some background. It also gets them, when they're ready to buy in, then they can sign up and volunteer to go into CIT school. But our chiefs, our previous one and this one current, have been agreeing with me that we're not going to just train everybody to check a box. We're going to do it because those officers want to respond to that call. Because there are officers that don't buy in, and we don't want them on calls if they don't want to be there. So I know a lot of agencies across the U.S. now, with all the stuff in the news, just are training and training. But we want to train people who want to be there.
So yeah, there are no volunteers. Everyone is a volunteer. Plus, we run our own CISM. I'm an ICIS instructor. We run our own CISM schools. We have, I think it's 39 officers trained in GRIN and another 37 trained in individual only. And that's important as we talk about what we did going through the incident. So the goals, and this is not just we do for CISM training, I mean at ICISF, but we present this elsewhere too. So it's explaining what the goals of CISM are. The stabilization, the normalize the reaction, okay, going through, encourage a positive coping, the new normal, and then referring if necessary, and that initial assessment. So a ground level picture of 888 Bestgate. And unless I can't describe what the pandemonium that was going on that day, what that looked like.
Yeah, it looks so normal.
Scene.
And I think why we're showing you these pictures, as we get to everything we did wrong or things we did right, as we start talking about getting people out of the building, what we did for our officers, all of this is, we're not here to talk about tactical or anything. We're here to talk about how to take care of each other and how to take care of the people who were in that building, which took on a very different role for us.
So the significance of this picture, so you understand, again, this is 888 Bestgate there, and I apologize, we don't have a clicker with a pointer. Citizens Bank is there. That was sort of the holding area. Everyone that was evacuated from 888 Bestgate, so let me backtrack. Scenes there, initial officers go in, the building's on complete lockdown. And what I mean by that, there are officers assigned in stairwells, elevators are not moving, and no one is moving in the building. You have the office patrolman there shutting down the building. SWAT teams get there, and it was a combination of Anne Arundel County, Maryland State Police, I think Howard County, Prince George's County, I'm not sure the counties. Anne Arundel County went through the first floor where the crime scene was. The other jurisdictions went through room by room, extricating people out. What I mean is they were escorted out by the SWAT teams, taken to the Citizens Bank. And it's just here so you can see that distance. I think it was 150 degrees that day. It was probably high 90s, but I'm telling you, it felt like 150 degrees. The key is, and this is where I've been told we were the first people to do this. Jen and I get the scene, she's with me, we go to the command post, and right away they're like, go into the bank and start helping. So as people were being brought out by the SWAT teams, they're taken into the bank. Now the bank is considered a warm area to me because the people are coming out. We still don't know for sure how many assailants there are. So that's the key for now. All our clinicians have ballistic vests. They're not, mine is black and it has police all over it. Hers is a pretty bright blue and it has clinician all over it.
Big, like.
So there's no confusion that she is not police, that she is a clinician. But the key is, as people were being triaged by homicide detectives, we're triaging them for their stability and their mental and emotional well-being. And it made a big difference. One of the survivors who had fled the building, he had been shot at, was running, came in, was brought in. And that's where we've known him, Jen knows him well from media things, and he's interviewed us and videotaped us for interviews, came in and we were able to stabilize him, first medically, because he's not a runner. So we were able to, fire paramedics came in to make sure that he was medically stable, and then talking to him, because he had to give interviews for the investigation. And that's the key, is with the clinicians paired with us, they have an understanding of what we do as police. Now, I'm a police officer first, but to understand that, yes, we have to help that person, but it is still a criminal investigation. And we don't want to do anything to jeopardize that. There are still people that were having panic attacks that are being followed up by our clinicians. And it may be a once a month call just saying, how are you doing? But it was that initial assessment in there where they talked to them and got their information to make that, to do that follow-up.
I think the key too for us being there, I can still picture walking into so many people, just, you gotta realize we were in a bank. And so when he came coming through and he saw me, he looked like he was gonna collapse. He had just kept running. And I'll admit he's not in the best of shape, so he's in there, traumatic event, runs out. He tells me I ran out, asked for help, and the person drove off, and I just kept running. So somehow he makes himself all the way back. I get him, I take him in, realizing how bad he is, and I kind of push off this desk and sit him down. Well, what did I just do? We're in a bank. So bank people are coming in, taking private papers off. We just came in and swarmed in and took over. And then I went, oh, sorry. But, I needed to get him in a safe place. One, because whatever he's going to say, we didn't want all the people as they were coming in to hear. Plus, we needed to get an officer in there and paramedics in there. But we kind of were just sitting people on desks and tables. And this is actually a bank that was open doing business, 40 minutes before that. So
171 people were evacuated. So we started the CISM response within 20 minutes of the incident for those 171 people. We sent, and this is where it's important, Jen sent one of our teams, one of our CIT officers who's in the unit, and a mobile crisis clinician who sometimes fills in CIT, but not normally, went to our criminal investigation division. So when the people, we call them the survivors, who were in the newsroom after they were being interviewed by detectives, the CISM intervention started for them.
And I think the one thing for us that was key is we had just had a couple of incidents, so I was really prepared in that, what I mean by that, not tooting my own horn, but I have enough staff that I can pull and they'll go. So en route, in the line of officers heading down the road, I'm already calling and going, I need you to stage here. And I literally, when you see that long street where all the police were, I had someone staged behind them all. I had a team staged on the end of the opposite road because our hospital is down that way. So I'm thinking someone's going to the hospital. So I need a team there. I need a team on the other side of the mall. I sent a team to CID because we know there's going to be witnesses somewhere, right? And then I called in and said, I need 2 mobile teams to stand still. Why? Because we still have a county to run, and we can't forget that while this chaos is going on and everybody's pulled in, what happens if something else happens outside of that? So making sure that I left, so I took a mobile clinician and paired them with an officer, but left teams intact back at the fort, because that's really important for us to do. And then it allows me to pull as I needed it. And that was really helpful. There
was some confusion And it's still confusion to this day. If an incident happens statewide anywhere, well, who should be the informational hotline? Out of default, because no one else was doing it, Jen made our warm line the hotline. So she was on CNN giving out our number as this is the number to call if you have questions or need help.
So learning experience for me, because I always just thought it automatically goes to our EOC, Emergency Operations Center, right? What I tell people, my biggest mistake or thing that I've learned the most, and now I'm working on our plan, is when an incident happens, you still have to wait for that to get set up. There's not enough people right there at EOC to take the phone. And by the way, this is happening 2:30, 3 o'clock. My phones are blowing up. I make the first mistake, well, not a mistake, but I told my boss who was heading in, hell no, don't come in. Why? Every head from every department is coming to the scene. Well, who's going to help on the outskirts at the places we need people? So I get on with the health officer and several people, and I'm like, we don't need you here. I need someone to send me people in and out, and I need someone to stay at the health department, and I need someone to go manage my system at our location where the warn line is, because guess what? EOC is not ready to run. It takes them a couple hours to get people in to answer the phones. So what are we going to do in the meantime? Because I'm hearing from our incident command that 911's blowing up, just call after call after call. So we had 30 minutes to figure out what are we going to do, put it out on TV. So the only thing I could think of is I have a 24-hour warn line. I know right now I've got 6 operators there. I got my boss heading there, and I can pull mobile teams who are clinicians onto those lines. We've got 16 lines that come in at any given time. Let's just use that. That's what we decided to do because panic set in for families trying to find their loved ones that we didn't want to tax 911. In hindsight, everybody really got upset with me for that decision because EOC is there to be EOC. Well, when I got on the phone for to activate with our incident command, you're telling me what number are we, they're still trying to figure out what number are we calling. I gotta get people there. I don't have time for that. I'm running, I got witnesses, I'm doing this, it's 150, I swear it's 150 degrees out. We are running from the front of 88 Bestgate to the witness, and oh, by the way, I'm still trying, because my job is to help set up a reunification site. So, meanwhile, all that's going on, I'm a mental health clinician. But guess what? There were little things you never think about when you set these plans up. And that's the things I want you guys to take today, is the well-being of the people you're evacuating, the family members who are panicking, oh, and by the way, all the people who responded. So I stand by this, and I still say, we have 4-hour meetings probably once a month right now, and I still say, I don't like your plan. Because nobody's thinking in real time. Nobody's thinking that in an hour, are you getting enough people to answer at EOC? No. So there has to be a plan 1 and then a plan 2. And does our phone need to roll to EOC an hour later? Maybe. But we're still trying to work that because even in the state of Maryland, we don't have a great plan.
We're actually on a committee, there's a Maryland Active Analytic Integrated Work Group where we're in the CISM committee for the CISM follow-up. And we're still working that out because the problem is we have to remember it's all based on the people we're helping. Not our convenience. It's what do they need at that time. And a key thing Jen said is, how do you get people there right away? Not there, but the services in line immediately when they need them.
And the thing is, I'm talking to the health department who's supposed to help man that, who's saying, well, you just told me you needed 6 people at the reunification that are clinicians, and now you want me to pour, and the comment I got was, you realize it's 4 o'clock. And I'm like, I'm not going to offend anybody, but I'm just in my head going, and I got people in my face and 2 phones going, are you kidding me? So that's when I just made the executive decision with the head of the communication side of our incident command. I said, let's just roll to the warn line. It's easy, we can get on TV, we can divert some of this panic that's happening, and we can do it fast, and I have enough people there.
So as all this happened, actually, we got in 20,000 steps that day.
Close. I think my thing died in the middle.
888 Bestgate, Here is the bank. So this is where everyone was triaged, taken out to the evacuation point. Here is the reunification center.
So for people who don't know, of course, not from around here, this is a mall. This is Annapolis Mall, downtown Bestgate. This is the road you saw blocked by all of the police cars. I have people staged down here. Our actual Arundel Medical Center is here. And this is the incident. So you're taking people to here. I've got 2 plus us teams here. And I sent 1 team and 6 mental health clinicians from the health department to the reunification site.
Yep. One thing we didn't talk about, 888 Bestgate. It's a professional building with doctor's offices, cardiologist offices, where you had
Pharmacy.
you had 80-year-old patients and the cardiologist that are now locked down, being taken out at gunpoint by SWAT teams who look like they're in combat, over to a bank, and then 100-degree weather walked to a reunification center. There was great, there was good and bad, and we'll get into that with the unification center, the conditions, but those positives I think outweighed that. But think of what these people were going through being taken over there. It was a miserably hot day. So, reunification center, it sucked. It was a vacant Lord & Taylor building that Lord & Taylor moved out and no one was using. It was dark. It was hot. The bathrooms were on another floor.
And I'm going to stick to it was great.
And because it was great, because let me go back the screen.
Because let me tell you who was complaining
Yeah.
about it being hot and miserable. Guess who was complaining about it being hot and miserable in there? My 6 mental health clinicians from the health department.
The staff.
Yeah.
So,
Not the people who are in there waiting for loved ones. They were thankful to be in it. What's nice about it is it's a Lord & Taylor, so think about it. Everything's gone, wide open like a big old rec center. I know you had to go upstairs to the bathroom, but one entrance was the secure piece that we could have. We had a captain and then the officers checking them in, because you go from checkpoint to checkpoint. They come in, they're open. After we got our act together and I regrouped with my team, there was that safety one of, there was construction because it's abandoned, so there's that wood piece that kind of blocks off when you are redoing the mall. They could enter the mall at any point to reunify, but it was kind of off the beaten path. So for me, the only people complaining were the people that I put there to work with me, not the people who were in there waiting for their loved ones.
So this is the media staging area. Here is what you saw on the news, when all international and national media. However, as people were being brought down, this is all secure area, but you had media in the outskirts here, walking up to patrolmen, handing them stacks of cards, saying, "Give these to everyone and tell them to call us." The officers were polite and threw them all away, or threw them places. But the media was all over the place, and that was the thing that we did a great job, and the mall was sensational. The media could not go on mall property. So as we're there, people were coming in, Lord & Taylor, all the restaurants were donating food. I know in a perfect world, we would have had somebody with us as a scribe, writing down everything we did. Someone as a scribe, writing down all the donations. We didn't have time for that. We had bigger issues to worry about. But I know Chick-fil-A brought us food. I mean, there was a ton of food, a ton of drinks. There was no issues, no one got sick. But it's that part, people could walk out if they had their cell phones, because going back to the parking lot, everything here is all the cars had to get stuck, were stuck there. People were not getting their cars. They had to find other ways home. So if they had a cell phone, they could call family or friend to come get them. They just went and blended into the mall. Now we already started the CISM process, sort of normalizing the reaction, just being there saying, we're here to help if you need us. And there were people that didn't need anything, but there were other people that did, and that was part of the assessment of CISM, that we were there to start that process.
And you're assessing them at Citizens Bank, because once we realized there was a medical facilities in there, So we wanted to make sure people could move from Citizens Bank across and that they were okay. And if not, we brought a paramedic in to sit with them. Because we did, we literally had people that were at the cardiologist. We had people who were sick with like the flu that were there getting meds from Kaiser's Pharmacy. You know, there was just so many different pieces going on that we would talk to them and build a rapport and then kind of warm hand them off to walk to the next staging piece. One thing that we do have to realize is so many people couldn't communicate with family because they were hiding somewhere in their office, and when SWAT busts in and takes them out, they weren't grabbing their purse or their phone, they were with whatever they had on going out. So we had a lot of people who didn't have the ability to didn't have a driver's license, didn't have anything on them.
Now, with as bad as it was that you had cardiologists with 80-year-old patients, the other side that was good, there was no pediatrician offices. There were no children involved in this incident at all. And what I mean by that, there were no children evacuated. The deceased children were all young adults. You had no children whatsoever except for the community larger piece that were directly affected in that building or had a loved one killed during the incident. So Jen said we had people being, so it truly was in that part of Unification where people could come there and meet up. We had one person that was screaming and having a temper tantrum because she could not get her car. And her co-workers were sensational because Jen offered to put her in a hotel.
She's like in my face. So I'm now at Unification, talking to the staff, kind of trying to get things organized. We were in group 2 bringing them over. We were bringing them over in groups. And this group, and she comes up and she's kind of at me, and you see her kind of colleagues come and pull her off, and she goes, and she's like, "What do you mean I can't go in?" And I'm like, "Ma'am, I can't let you back, and it's not going to be today," because we already knew that. And I said, I can help you get with family. And the colleagues come and they kind of pull her back, and their statement was, "There's always one in every group. We'll take care of her." And they took her off in the corner. Because for me, I'm about to say, are you kidding me? We have people deceased, we have people injured, and that's what you're worried about. But you're going to have it. You're going to have it. You're going to, people are now realize they're alive, and now they're kind of panicking still, but they want to get home. They just want to get out of there.
And Jen offered her a hotel room, but it wasn't, whatever it wasn't the top-notch hotel that was accepted her standards.
Oh, God.
So. Okay, we talked about this. I talked to this yesterday. We're in the Unification Center, and that's where I talked about conflicts. What do? We have media all over the place. I'm with Jen, and we see a person with cameras and media credentials.
So, like I said, we're bringing them in the back door, and then we are letting them go out this makeshift door to the mall. But at the time I'm trying to set this up, I see 2 guys coming with cameras, and I'm like, I just go, oh, hell no. And so I go up, and I'm like, you can't be in here. You need to get out. How did you get by? Da, 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 da. And I'll never forget, because I talk to them a lot now, and I didn't recognize at the time, and they're like, I need to find my friends. And I remember handing the camera, well, you can have my camera. Where are my friends? We forgot. It's the Capital Gazette. It's the newspapers. They weren't there to take pictures. They were panicking because they were in the field when the call came out, and they wanted to find their coworkers. So I kind of took a deep breath and said, let's bring you in. I need to find out who you're looking for, who you think is there. And then that also was information that was helpful that we were able to relay back. But we also had to deal with the fact that they were just in shock at that point. And so we kind of took them off separately to the side.
Just to show people were just bringing food. The next morning, these 2 ladies showed up. Now, Jen and I were there all night. We left, we left the scene at 11, left our office at 1, and we were back at the scene at 5. And at like 7 the next morning, these ladies showed up with gallons of coffee and dozens of donuts. And I pulled rank and I made the officers carry the donuts because I was like, no one's getting a picture of me carrying donuts.
He's not lying. I ended up carrying.
I don't blame you.
So
Smart man.
we hit on this, some of the things about Unification Center's concerns. we did a great job of protecting the media from the media. We really did. We did a sensational job. Those that were there, the family members, we took out different exits throughout the mall that none of them had contact. Now, yesterday I talked about the media, that was actually the reporters that went and they chose that. The family members we protected because they wanted to be protected.
So the big thing that I harped on the whole time was trying to figure out where everybody was, but also I had a lot of different trainings, and what had stood in my mind was one that I did on the Navy Yard shooting, and the fact that I needed to know who was deceased as soon as possible. And I'm lucky because the command staff in our police department, we have a really good respected relationship. I feel like I can kind of go and talk to them at any time. But I was pretty adamant with them, probably hour 3, after our first conference, TV conference, that I need the IDs ASAP. And they're like, you're not getting it. And I'm like, you don't understand. We've got probably about an hour before this shit is going to explode in our faces. Why? It's media. We started releasing people out of the reunification site. So you look at that big map, and I was walking from kind of outside of the road to 888 to Citizens, back down to the thing, up to the command post, over probably 15 times, 20 times at this point. And when I went back the last time to reunification, there was less and less people there. Well, what do we know? Less and less people, families still there that aren't hearing anything, not a good thing. We start knowing, and then we're not doing a death notification at that point because they're going to already know. I didn't want that to happen. So, problem is you've got a crime scene, they don't want to do that, and I said, well, you're going to have a really bad situation in about another hour if we don't get on this. So we worked really hard to try to positively ID people so that we could let those families know. And I have to say, we were able to notify in 5 hours, which for me is something that I don't want to be proud of, but I gave the families that were at that reunification, so the people that were waiting still at the reunification site, I gave them the ability to hear it from one of us, which was really, really important, and something that I learned over and over again in the places that I've kind of listened to other mass.
And it was the 2 of us, and we had a police chaplain with us. Another thing that happened was members of the staff knew who the deceased were. And that was something that one of the staff members of upper management knew, and actually went and she yelled at him and said, you can't, because he was going in unification, don't go in there, let us do our job. So they actually, the upper management of the Gazette, or the Capital Gazette, they walked in with us as we did notifications. And, you know, we didn't know, again, it's one big open area. How do you do this? I've had death notification classes, but it's that thing, those variables, how do you do it? Because we didn't know how they were going to be situated. And luckily, each family was by themselves in a big distance. Because I've heard the horror stories of places where officers or a team will go in, do a death notification, and they hear the screaming of the family, and then people in the next room, they try to isolate them, but the next room's like, oh shit, here comes the death squad. We just heard them yelling, and now they're coming over. We didn't have that happen. We walked in, they didn't even notice when we were doing it. It wasn't a big caravan, it was just the 2 of us, Kenny. We walked over to the first family, told them, and like I said, each family was they were distance apart, and then we went to the second family, and then the third was like, you're wrong, he's not dead. And that was the key thing of that. We didn't want a mistake to be made of having a wrong identification. One of the other families that I talked to later, the wife told me, she said, we knew he was dead. We just, in our mind, we knew he was dead. We just needed the confirmation. I did a training with people from the Pittsburgh CISM team They told me at the synagogue shooting, it took 12 hours of death notification. That they had all 12 families, one room, 12 families, each family was at a table, and eventually somebody stood up and said, okay, you told us there's 12 dead, there's 12 families here, can we just assume it and get on with this? Because they were hurting, they needed that to be told. And Jen did a great job, because she harped on the command staff to get it. Because it goes against nature of policing. And I said it yesterday, normally the crime scene tape goes up, call a timeout, and go in slow motion mode. Technically, police aren't even supposed to touch the deceased body. Only the medical examiner can do that. So it takes some things to do those identifications.
Now, you do have the problem of families that, because it is the capital and that's under the Baltimore Sun and all that, you have reporters that they didn't live in Annapolis. So we had one family that never came to the reunification site. And in hindsight, we probably made a mistake.
But
I don't know that we did, because I wouldn't do it any differently. I don't believe in putting that on another jurisdiction. So we took one of our CIT officers, and I cleared our clinician from the hospital because the 2 people who were injured were released. So at that point, I knew we were good. They had now gone to CID. Now they're at CID with my other team. So I took that clinician and said, can you go to Montgomery County and do that last notification? Because I believe that's the way it should be done.
So, and the key is to be really clear, the CIT officer that went with her was not in our unit. He is a CIT trained officer, he's a PAC officer, Police and Community Together, works out of Eastern District. So we had a ton of people self-deploy, including Jen and I. And what I mean by that, our active assailant response doesn't say crisis response, CIT response. At least then it did. Now it just changed that they put in there that we are to be notified immediately to be responding with SWAT and everybody else. But we took an officer who was not in our unit, but trained CIT and CISM, and paired him with a clinician who was trained in CISM, but not necessarily in the unit, to make another CIT team to do that. I'll say, and it's my decision, and I'll stick with it, for us to do death notification, we have to go and have our teletype send a teletype to Montgomery County, and then Montgomery County will then dispatch one of their officers to go out and do the death notification. I think it was still faster the way we did it. It was just those unfortunate circumstances of the media being involved, that when they rang the doorbell, she had gotten a phone call from another media person 5 minutes earlier telling her husband was dead. And again, that was probably within 5.5, 6 hours of the incident, which if you hear other places and other active assailant incidents, death notifications are never made that fast.
And I think the issue is, do you have is the next picture the one of them?
No,
Okay.
it's going to be a while.
Steve talked about this yesterday in his talk. I think our biggest problem was protecting the media from themselves. Because they're a national organization, right? You got the Sun, they're the capital under that. They're always pushing articles out. And we're now trying to protect their families from other news areas getting a hold of them. That was, I think, the constant battle that I had. And literally, you get to that piece, and like he said, I mean, I reamed out the head of the Capitol. I didn't know who he was at the time, but someone mentioned that he was getting ready to go do the notifications because Incident Command had him in to help confirm what was going on in his building, right? So then he takes upon himself, starts walking across the street and up across the mall parking lot. I'm running from Citizens Bank across. Mind you, at this point, my socks are completely sweaty, drenched. And I just get in his face and I'm like, you have to let me do my job. Because he was going to march right into that unification because he's got the ability to do that because he's the only one led in this whole area because he's the head and he's helping the police department with a lot of things. But he was going to march right in there and tell each family on his own. And luckily, we've become kind of good friends since then, I just got in his face and said, you have to let me do my job. But let me and my team do my job, I will let you be there because you're going to know these families better at the end of the day. But one thing we always have to remember in death notification is families always remember that day. Doesn't matter what the notification is, car accident, heroin overdose, whatever it is that happens on the day of the death, they always remember how they're told. And that is something that has always stuck with me to make sure we do it right. And so when we walk in there, it was great. He had his wife with him, who really had a bond with a lot of the wives and the children of these families who had been there for a long time, that when we walked in to do notification, they could stay when we moved on to the next family. And then he would come with me, his wife stayed with one family. It was just, it worked out really well after we had that stressful moment outside, and he kind of checked himself and realized he wasn't in control of that situation.
Now, again, for this slide, the reason, and CISM, we call it the 5 T's. We do this presentation out in the public, and the who normally in CISM is a target. Well, when you're talking about an active assailant, I don't want to refer to all the victims as targets. Here's a different environment than when we're out doing it. Next week, we're presenting at the state for emergency management. But we're going through this. The action plan started before the unification at the bank. That's when we started triaging. That's when we started recognizing what services are people going to need. What are we going to need at reunification? Where are we going to have to go from here? So, who was affected? Who may have a stress reaction? And it was a lot of people. Because it wasn't just 100, it wasn't just the people in the newsroom, it wasn't just the 171 that were there evacuated from the building, it was the entire community. So here's the list of the officers, and there's actually people that we didn't. There's federal agencies that we didn't reach. It was just over that we didn't go all the way out as far. We could have even had more people. But this is where we drew the line. So there was a ton of sub-stories, a ton, especially because of it being the media and what's going on in the political nature of the country right now. That is a picture. All these pictures in here, same as I said yesterday, are pictures that were in the Capital Gazette that they published themselves.
So this is powerful because this is day and a half later. Of course, at that point, there's visuals going on. And we had worked together. They wanted to be out there for one. And just to kind of give you a reference point, this is the guy whose face I got into, Rick, who is the editor head of the Capital. And all the people to the right, starting with the woman in the white dress over, are all victims who escaped, who felt the need to show the public that they were okay. They kind of went back and forth on whether they should be out there or not, but at the end, I think it's the start of a healing process for them. So this is in downtown Annapolis by the Naval Academy.
Phil Davis, one of the reporters, was tweeting as the incident was going on from under his desk. Think about that. He was tweeting what was going on. Another of the reporters was on the phone with a sergeant from Annapolis City when the incident happened.
And imagine, you're trying to contain things, and I, at this point, had no idea this stuff had gone out until actually after the notifications, because I'm just too busy. It was actually the state's attorney who showed me a bunch of stuff as I kind of took a breath, probably around 9 at night. But you're trying to stay ahead of it. You got someone who's the victim under their desk waiting for help. And we'll get to a little bit more interesting fact on that under the desk piece. But he's tweeting out while he's waiting to be evacuated. These are the two guys who tried to, this is the picture I think I love the most. These are the two guys who tried, that we led into the unification that I thought were trying to get in to tell the story. Who then, afterwards, we talked to them and they felt really helpless, like you're dealing with a helpless piece. So this picture actually ended up in the newspaper. They decided the way to honor their friends was to set up a makeshift spot under the parking garage and begin writing stories for the next day, because they felt like the only thing they could do to be helpful was do what they do best, which is try to tell the story from the outside looking in.
Headlines across. So, reporter, I couldn't give about your prayers on CNN in reference to the president. The theme that we dealt with is a theme the community dealt with. That was a candlelight vigil Friday night through the city of Annapolis. There was 3 candlelight vigils at once, and this was the largest of the 3. Makeshift memorials at the scene of 888 Bestgate. This is the suspect. Mass shootings cannot happen anywhere.
And that's at our previous chief. And what you don't realize, and this is kind of what I learned about 9 that night, that's me in that picture. It's an article on our team that was done by the Capital Gazette, basically talking about the interventions we do to try to stop things from happening. And it's almost like a laughable thing. He's throwing it up in his tweet. The article that was written on us starting this team way back in the day. So he posted that.
And actually, well, he sent it September 14th when Eric Hartley wrote the article. He was the reporter. That is who he had the feud with. Eric Hartley is no longer at the Capital Gazette. He's at another newspaper in another part of the country. But think about it. That's another victim that we had interactions with who came back to support his former co-workers.
This is a real important part we'll get to probably a little bit later, but we just want to show you is what do you do when you try to move on? And how do you do things to not offend families, to make sure these memorials that are put up are respected, and while we're doing interventions that we don't want that reminder there too long, because it's also hard for people who are going back to work, going back into their buildings. And so we just put those up to kind of show you there was just memorials everywhere along Bestgate Road.
So as we developed the crisis action plan going through, we did every intervention that there is, every form of one. That night, Thursday night, I don't even know what time it was. It was probably 9, 10, it could have been 11 o'clock. I called Mark Junkerman and Michelle Warschauer. So Mark Junkerman is a lieutenant in Harford County. He presented on Tuesday night. We've gone up to help him, and we're good friends. Michelle is ICISF staff that works on our CISM team. And actually I finished, so when the incident happened, Michelle knew, because I called her and said, "You're not going to believe this," as I'm driving to get Jen, saying we have the active shooter. I called both of them and said, "I need you to help tomorrow." And they're like, "What do you need?" I'm like, "I have no idea. I just need you at my office at 8 o'clock and we'll go through it." Throughout the day, we were taking notes and compiling notes. Well, that night when we got back, we created the flow chart, which I think was 3 or 4 pages long, of who needed help, who to do the help, the intervention, when we could do it, and contacts to do the interventions.
And part of that came from, remember, I never activated EOC because we couldn't get our act together. So the warm line continuously took calls through the night, because once we got that rolling, we weren't going to switch the number at like 7, 8 at night. So when I got back around 11:30 at night to the office, my staff had left on my desk sheets. They had broken down every family that had called consistently with names. I never trained them to do that. I don't know how they knew to do it, but it was helpful. Basically, it was a sheet, because once the names went out to deceased, they took the deceased name at the top and they wrote every family member that called in the warm line, their phone number, where they were. Even though we had met with them and gotten information, and then groups of people calling in to help, and they left me therapy dogs, they left me everything that could have been of help right there on my desk. I still had staff because we're 24 hours a day, but we were rotating fresh people in, and the people who had taken the brunt of it left me great information, which I think is so key, because I don't have time to go on a computer to see or to read all those notes.
And for me, of course you don't there's no set how you do a response to this, but the ICISM training kicked in. And all the stuff from the individual, the group class, through the advanced classes, really of what to do. So, who was best to help? The clinicians normally with the public, and then officers as peers for other officers in the department. When could we do it? We made a major mistake. We were doing interventions that night, that before anyone went home, there was interventions. Annapolis City responded. They have to go back to the district or their office. We did a sort of a diffusing there for them. They were off, the way their schedule worked, when they got off that night, they were off till Monday morning at 6 a.m. So we had that intervention. We had a team at our southern district where everyone that was on scene that were writing reports went back to. This is where our mistake was. The incident happened right before 3 o'clock. Day work 7 to 3:30, evenings works 3 to 11. You had day work officers that just were finishing up their tour duty, respond to this, and are held probably the earliest 9, some 10, 11 o'clock at night. They had to be back at work the next morning for 7 o'clock lineup. Now we were prepared. We had people there. We had a team officer who's a peer and clinician to be there to do a debriefing. The problem is none of the officer supervisors were physically or emotionally ready for that. Physically they were drained, and emotionally they were drained. And what should have happened is anyone who was intricately involved, and I don't know where we draw that line, but they should have been on administrative duty the next day. They should have been able to sleep and show up late in the afternoon, and we could have done one debriefing with the evening officers and the day work officers together. It still fits the criteria of a homogeneous group because they work together. They might be different shifts, but they're still in the same district and they know each other well. That was a mistake that was made. And I don't want to say we made it, it was something, a learning lesson, because that day was overwhelming. And you still need people, like Jen said earlier, you still needed mobile teams to respond to the public. We still need police to work the next day. And that's where that line is drawn, is how and I'm not sure, we could have done that a lot better.
And I think because we're integrated so much, it's probably 8 at night. I'm walking from the reunification to the incident command to check in, which I'm supposed to do every 30 minutes, because by the way, your phones die 100 times over, because I don't know what happens, but everything drains. Like, I literally had to drop my phone in incident command probably 5 times just to get enough juice to take call. My phone usually lasts all day, so why is it drained? I don't know what was happening, but I have 2 phones and both of them were, so I'm walking over to drop them to check in, and this officer walks beside me, and these are the things that I think I've learned more, like when we talk about all the mistakes we made. He knew me, we're walking, and mind you, we're sweaty, we're tired, and I just grabbed a bottle of water, and he walks up and he's like, "Hey Jen, I'm not okay." And I said, so we started walking, and I said, "Tell me what's going on." We started talking, and I said, well, I'm going to check back in with you in a few minutes, but it's okay if I just tell your supervisor maybe tomorrow you need to take the day. You know, this is what we need to do. We've developed a peer-to-peer group. We are really forefront of taking care of our officers. Here's the problem. I've got 20,000 people I feel like I'm trying to take care of. I walk up to his sergeant and I say, "Hey, I got permission from this officer to talk to you. He's not okay. My recommendation is once he clears this post, or if we can get someone in, to give him some time until I can check back in the next day." "Yep, okay, sounds good, thanks." I know the sergeant very well. I show up the next morning at about 4:45 in the morning, because we have all this stuff going on, medical examiner's there, but I wanted to go home and shower. I get out of what I needed to do. It's about 6:30, 6:45. I'm walking down towards Bestgate. Who the hell is standing post? That officer who's not okay. And so for me, it was, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong that he actually reached out saying he needed help? I told his sergeant, but when I circle back around, he's there, fatigued, standing the line, making sure nobody gets by. And we've met and talked about it since then. I think our problem, and one thing we need to do better, is how do you get replacements in? Because he was a 7 to 3 who had to come back on the next morning at 7, and he's telling me that, but the next morning he doesn't want to let his troops down. So even though he's not okay, he's not feeling right now to say he's not okay, because he did it already, and yet he's still standing there.
And
So
he
that's a
wasn't-
piece of breakdown that's concerning.
He wasn't one that went in the building. He wasn't one of those initial responders that were stepping over deceased. He was just on the scene. So I'm not demeaning him at all by saying that, but just, he wasn't one that saw the carnage inside, which we didn't see, but we were there the next, and we'll get into that, what happened the next day and what we saw, and that was bad enough.
But I think we need to do a better job of making sure that when we get to that point next time, that there's people to fill in, or that we're taking care of the people who are reaching out and saying, I'm not okay. That's our job. So, circling back to the sergeant, it just was, Jen, you did tell me, but like, by the time I got there, it slipped my mind. Well, that's not okay either. So, it's checkpoints for that piece, because we did go and debrief them. I actually talked to big groups of people before they even went to their district. I made sure pizza was at every district so that there was food. Even though we had food there, nobody was eating. Nobody was eating as they were moving. It was too hot and we were too adrenaline-based to eat. So I wanted there to be stuff at the districts as well.
So we had a CISM trained peer at the scene just to be there for officers. That's Stanley. He's our CISM, and it's important to remember Stanley because some of the things he did going on. So Stanley's bike patrol, that's all he does, but he's CIT trained and he's CISM trained, and he's sensational. But think of the role he's playing. He's in his bike patrol, the AR-15, the roles that he played that day. So again, we talked about this in Annapolis City. Monday morning when they went back in, Mark Junkerman, actually I was there and left at 6, but Mark was there and did a debriefing with Annapolis City on their first day back to work. So in Southern District, we had a CIT team there. We really can't do, it's difficult for in Anne Arundel County to do a defusing or a Ritz. And the reason I say that is we all have take-home cars. And different people's responsibilities are going to keep them later based on what they're doing at the incident. We're not going to do a group intervention, I'm not going to tell an officer, you have to stay here for another 2 hours till your partner's done all his paperwork to do the group intervention. Because remember, we can't do an intervention, a group intervention until the mission's over and everyone's done what they have to do for that assignment. I'm not going to tell people you're going to sit, they want to go home. They're going to get pretty pissed off if they're told they have to sit there for 2 hours or 3 hours to wait for everyone. So we did all individuals at Southern District at the end of the shift. The next morning, 7 o'clock lineup, we had a team there to do a group intervention for a debriefing, and then again at the 3 o'clock lineup. What we should have done, again, is we still should have done that, but those intricately involved, we should have done one debriefing with all of them together late in the day. So we also had a team in communications, and the key to this, again, we don't have that many teams, is Jen was taking her clinicians, and I'm taking patrolmen who were trained in CIT and peer support and CISM and doing these interventions. So they were at our communication lineup at 6:45 in the morning and again at 2:45 because both day work and evening communications were involved. They were taking the 911 calls from the public.
And I think it's something going forward, we do a lot now. We forget about communications that takes those initial calls. We had a critical incident about a couple months prior to this where we learned that you have to go to dispatch. Like, they remember the call coming in, and their conversation is always, I never know what happens after that. Nobody fills in the blanks. So I go home to try to lay down, and all I keep thinking about is the call I took and where did it go from there. So we've been really trying to hone in on making sure dispatch has that gap filler so that they're well enough to get back to work and do their job.
On that Friday, the sheriff's office also responded. Mark Junkerman and Michelle Warschauer went and did a debriefing with the sheriff's office of those that responded. Again, we were having outside people come in and help us because we couldn't do it ourselves. We needed help, it was too big. They then went and did a debriefing with the detectives at our gang unit. One of the detectives, the young lady who, the first one that Rebecca was shot, one of the detectives carried her out to the fire department where she died. Jen and I went to the cabin.
Let's back up a second. So the one thing that our outside agencies that I learned that I will not do again was, remember I pulled in all those health department employees? So, mistake number one, none of them were CISM trained. So, note to self, I don't care if you're a clinician or not, you're not necessarily a clinician that knows how to do these situations. So, what we didn't talk about when we were doing the death notifications was that behind me, staff were crying and couldn't pull themselves together because they had been with those families for a few hours, and now we're there telling them their loved one is deceased when they've been hearing stories, and they're not equipped to handle it. Because, by the way, one of them is just an assessor in the court system, one of them is a supervisor who pushes paper now, they might be LCPCs and LCSWCs, but the problem was they've never had CISM, they didn't know what to expect, and oh, by the way, they've never been trained in any kind of active shooter or critical incident. Funny thing, fast forward to Friday morning, I'm with their boss and I'm like, hey, I'm going to come by later this afternoon. I don't know why I was saying this because I knew I had a lot on my plate, but I said, hey, I'm going to come by because I want to check on your staff. That, we're good. We're good. We don't need you. We'll meet with them. They'll be fine. Until all of a sudden people started ringing my phone a week later talking about, how's that family doing? I can't stop thinking about this. Note to self, I don't care how high up you are in the chain. I know that people need to debrief. And from now on, everybody, my team, we brought in Michelle and Jeff Mitchell to debrief us. What makes you think I think those guys who aren't even trained in it can handle it after sitting in there with those families? So, in hindsight, I'm not going to take that as an acceptable answer moving forward. Everybody will get somebody to debrief with, if it's individual or group. We will figure out a way. I will not make that mistake again.
And then we trained, I think it was 10 health department clinicians in CISM back in February.
That's who was in the class. All the ones who were in that reunification they wanted the class. They, at that point, really wanted to know, because they wanted to help, they just weren't equipped. So that was a big learning experience for me.
So Friday afternoon, Jen and I meet the bosses at the Capital Gazette to clean out the office. So at that point, we're actually meet back up because I didn't say it in here. Our cadet class, our recruit class, did a grid search of the building, which means basically you take officers and they walk like this just to make sure that they next to each other, that no evidence was missed. It's still, being in that newsroom at that time, even after the deceased bodies were removed, there's still a lot of blood and things like that. They were in training up at the state police driving facility in Carroll County. They left from 888 Bestgate, went right there. We had Carroll County go do a CMB for that class, just to let them know, hey, you're having a normal reaction, and this is how you take care of yourself. But again, it wasn't practical for us to drive to Carroll County, but we had the team in Carroll County that could help us do that. So Jen and I go to meet the bosses from the Sun paper to clean out all the desks at the office. They weren't going to let any of their personnel back in to the office. So this is the the personal belongings of the deceased, as well as the survivors, as well as employees who were not there when the incident happened. One of the deceased, social media page was up, and you can see all the messages from his wife trying to check in with him, and other friends trying to check in. That was hard, because we were going through all the mementos on their desks. But it was important for us to be there for the bosses who were doing that.
And also because at this point, it's only, you're only 24 hours into the notification, but we've built a rapport with a lot of these families and there's things they were asking for, so if we could get them to just kind of help them, we were doing that. It feels really awkward going through the belongings, but there were, one of them, the children really were asking for certain things off their mother's desk, so we were really trying to meet them where they were, because it was really the only thing they had left for this long period of time. So we were very cautious in making sure we got the stuff that they were asking for, along with any belongings we could.
One of the things we did really well was here. Stanley, the picture, the bike patrol with the AR-15. He's got the biggest smile in the world. His partner, who's also CIT trained, CISM trained, and another officer, again, trained in both. We're at 888 Bestgate with one of our clinicians. As at first on the Friday morning, the parking lot was released, so people were showing them to get their cars. Those officers walked everyone to their car just to check in and make sure they were okay, and they had clinical support there to back them up.
And we also gave them a card, got their name so that they could call in if they needed anything. It was just kind of a roundabout way. It was nice because as you walked with them to their car, they were processing. And that kind of gave us a good idea and gauge where people were in the building for the next part that we were going to do.
Okay, I hit that already. So actually, I went and met with two of the families of the deceased on that Saturday. The first family, when I called and checked in on them Friday mid-morning, she was not doing well at all. And I said, well, how about if I come out now? And she was like, no, you can't come out now, come out tomorrow. So I went, one of our clinicians went with me. We had 12 o'clock to get there. We got there. And a lot of it was talked yesterday by Dr. Everly. When I got there, all of her social supports were there, and she was okay. Friday, it was just her and her children. Saturday, the family all got there from out of town, and that's where it's so important. She forgot we had a meeting. And she was extremely appreciative and thanked me, and every time I see her now, she still thanks me. But when her family social supports got there, that's what stabilized her. Because she was just like, I don't know what to do, I don't know about the funeral, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. And I'm just like, we will come out and we'll walk through it with you, and we will help you with whatever you need. Well, the supports got there, she no longer needed us. And we let her know we were still there for her if she did. But that was what she needed. The second family we went and saw was the one from death notification was made of shock trauma. Problem is the family went into hiding because of the media. And it took a while for me to track them down. And it wasn't until late Friday night I was actually able to find them. And we actually had to go meet at another distant family's member's house because they didn't, just because of being harassed by the national media. Jen and I, and additional clinicians went to the building when they opened it back up for business on Monday morning, and that was really important for everyone.
We spent a lot of the weekend working with the building and made sure that everything was in a way that when they opened the building up Monday morning, that we weren't showing more trauma. Like, you don't want a piece of wood up at the glass door that was shot through. So they really made an effort to get doors in from other buildings they brought in so that it could look as normal as it could for the people returning. And so they worked really diligently all weekend to try and do that. The one thing that was a little difficult was SWAT bust every door in, so the doors kind of had these, I mean, there's nothing you could do about these circles that were on the door. It was going to take some time. But down where the incident actually occurred, we made sure that it was as put together as possible.
Now, that week was 4th of July holiday week, so there were half the employees in the building actually took off the whole week. So on June 9th, we did the same exact thing again, when everyone was back. And I'm telling you, people were walking in, and it was hard for some people to come in when they were returning to work.
One of the things that we did, and I learned this years ago from Jeff Mitchell, was on the back of, one of the back of the books of the group and individual is kind of the things to look out for. And so I always copied that when I go to roll calls on traumatic events. And Steve, I'd actually learned that from Steve, because Steve started it, I can't take all the credit. But when we go to roll calls to debrief officers, we would always leave a few of those, because officers don't want to ask questions, but it's funny how they'll kind of go and they'll look through. Oh, it's normal not to sleep for a few days. Oh, I might break up my routine. I might not want to eat. So just kind of looking at those things is important. So what we did is we took that, and then on the front, we put a bunch of information plus our number. And what we did is it was kind of an update, and then that on the back, and we took it to every business. And it was a great way on July 2nd. We waited till about 10 when everybody was coming, noticed more people were in, and we just went into the front reception of every area and said, hey, we just want to make sure everybody's okay. Here's some information. You can photocopy for your staff. Let me know if you need anything. Just left it.
And actually, it should be in however the app is. Both things we handed out are there so you can look at them so as a handout, however that happens.
And I highly recommend it because it's amazing the calls we got for follow-up. There was one office where the staff were just struggling about 2 weeks in, and we actually sent a mobile team out and they met with all the staff. We did a debrief, and they just all got to talk about things that were going on. I had a lady call me, and I met with her at the office, and what I didn't know at the time, had hidden in the closet, was one of the last ones evacuated out. She was so scared she didn't want to even open the closet that she was hiding in for the police. Because is it really police? Is it not police? All those things that are going through your head. So having those conversations, I think it really bridged the gap for information. It allowed us to get it out and meet with people.
One of the healthcare providers has a vault for the pharmacy. The entire staff was hiding in that vault until the SWAT team got there. So evidence collection, we had a team, actually it was Stanley from Bike Patrol. He and a clinician went and did a debriefing for the evidence collection for the administrative staff, and then another one for the ones that were there processing the scene. Just think of what they see, and they see all the carnage, and they're forgotten about a lot. The one that we downloaded, Dr. Wells wrote for us for helping your child cope with violence. Even though there weren't children at the scene, they were still affected in the community because it was all over the media and everyone it was all over.
And officers, even my family. So I'm en route with him, lights and siren, and the only call my husband gets is, hey, I don't know when I'll talk to you again, but I'm okay. Click. So around 10 at night, I get a text from my daughter going, don't you think it'd be great if we opened a donut shop and you didn't have to do this anymore? And I didn't get it right then because my phone kept dying, so I didn't get to respond to her before she went to bed, right? So all these things that happen because they start thinking. And the conversation needs to be, how do we help our families as well, people who are responding to the scene, not just people who are in the building or people who lost individuals. And it's funny, and I don't say this often, but just about 3 months ago, I'm taking my daughter and her friend to eat, and we're going down Bestgate. And the girl in the back, because where I live, they don't know what I really do, so the girl goes, hey, do you know that's where that shooting happened? And my daughter turns and goes, yes. And we don't talk about it because my mom was there. It was like a defense mode, right? So I said, did we talk about it? why not? She's like, oh, okay, so then we just kind of had a conversation about how things roll, but that's where it's important to understand that kids, mine's in middle school, everybody's processing it. And when we have these events, we need to make sure that we're addressing it with kids, because what we found out from a lot of people in the building was family members were concerned about them going back to work. And then they didn't know how to answer those questions, and they didn't know how to talk to their family about it. So we did a lot of work on that, probably the next month out.
We also we did a CMB, and I talked to Dr. Everly about it, and he was like, definitely you cannot do a live one. Because the conversation with the county exec's office was, we could have done one at Maryland Hall, for the community, anyone could have showed up. The whole issue was, one of those themes is gun control versus not.
Right.
And the biggest fear would have been antagonists showing up and creating a problem. There was one person that drove around for like a week with different slogans and a megaphone on his truck just driving around that building.
There's always one.
Yeah, there's always one. But so we used the county TV station and created a CMB where the county exec went through the facts, and then George went through the normalization and the coping. And then we put it out on social media, the county website, as well as the county TV station, put it the cable station. So our business liaison went 2 blocks around the entire 888 Bestgate, giving out information to all the businesses. Because they were all affected.
Also, my agency purchased large trays of cookies and delivered them to the bank, because like I told you, we came in there like a windstorm and just took over. And so as a partner thing, after he went through as the liaison, that next day we went in, all the clinicians, and just said thank you and talked to them. And it was really cool because they felt like they helped. It was interesting to listen to the dialogue. They didn't mind because they felt like they actually did something to give back. And it was a really good engagement. And food always helps, and delivering snacks always helps. So it allows people to sit down, relax, and kind of have that conversation. And I think we need to remember those businesses around that they're affected as well.
And they actually, the bank, not only from shutting down, which they had to do, they had key fobs to open doors that were lost. And who knows
They
what
gave them
happened
to us, and then we don't know where they went.
So, I mean, they had to pay to get that stuff, and I can imagine with their security system how much that stuff cost.
It wasn't us. It wasn't me. I felt bad because everybody was looking for him.
Suspect's family called in the crisis response saying, how can we help you help those that were affected? So our response right away was, well, how can we help you? So we sent a clinician and a CIT officer who were both on vacation that week and were not involved to go meet with the family, and met with the entire family at once, which was really helpful for the family. The memorials that we showed you earlier, the pictures, again, I talked about it yesterday. How do you remove them? So 5 in the morning, I went with one of our chaplains and the maintenance from the property management. We held hands, we said prayers, and then piece by piece, we removed each piece of the memorial. We put it in one of their vans, and then they took it and put it in storage temporarily, just to assure that there wouldn't be any problems. Working with property management, the News Museum from DC came out a few days earlier and took artifacts that they could use to put in a permanent display. I mean, a lot of the issues were if things were damp, water damage, mold, and that kind of stuff, they couldn't use it. We're still working with all the families that were involved. We still see them. At times I feel guilty because there's some of the reporters and families, we are a trigger for them, for the incident. When they see us, you can tell right away that it's a trigger for them.
and it's interesting now, I had to do an interview with one of the survivors, and after the call, we were talking, and the things you don't realize, because it is awkward, because now we're seeing in two different lights, is conversation turned to how they're doing after the interview was done. And so being able to change roles from, oh, you're interviewing me, can I trust you with what I'm saying, being printed correctly, to I need 30 minutes of your time to just talk this out. And so that's been the constant theme, whether people were in the room or not in the room, is I was at an opening of something, and one of them just came up and just gave me a hug. And that was it. And it is, and sometimes I wonder, is it that we're a trigger? Or is it that they're like, oh, it's someone who understands? That's the part I'm not sure of, and I don't know that I'll ever know. But whatever they need, we just make sure that we kind of go where they are and talk that out.
And I talked about yesterday the issue of volunteer when they had mental health services for follow-up that was given to them. They've come to us saying, we need help finding other care.
Yeah, so at the beginning, everybody wants to help you. Everybody's offering free services, and I can see these people and just refer them to my agency. These guys need help for a long time. What happened? They got in, they got a relationship with someone, and then all of a sudden, I don't take your insurance. And I can't do this for free anymore. That's what started to really happen. And I got to tell you, I got really angry over that the first couple of calls I got, because I thought we were as clinician I thought we were better than that. And so dealing with that was kind of hard, but trying to link people with someone that they could connect with after already connecting with someone was really tough.
And we were getting called to the newsroom every day for the first week for different staff. We even got called for staff that had been Sun Paper reporters. So the Capital Gazette is owned by the Sun Papers. The Sun Papers were sending reporters to cover for the Capital Gazette. So you had reporters from the Sun Paper that weren't Capital Gazette employees, didn't really know the people involved, but were thrown into everything there afterwards, that were going into crisis, that they were calling us for, saying, can you come down, talk to them, and help.
And talk about the work environment. So they kept the paper running in a makeshift office that we packed up for them, that was in just a small room that they're still at, that they had to go through security to get in. So now we have private people securing them. So every day at work is a trauma. You're going into an undisclosed location so nobody can find you, through security, walked up, doors are locked.
Let me stop her. The security guy's a great guy,
He's a great
but
guy.
he's a goon. Okay, I go up, I'm scared of him. I mean,
I'm always like, yes, sir.
He is the ultimate security. You want security, he's the one you want there. I mean, he was intimidating, and no one's gonna, it was like the retired special forces, retired everything else that was there doing security.
He's the kind that reminds me he's going to snap me like a twig quickly when I walk up. And I'm always like, hi, remember me? He's like, I remember you. You know, you're here like 3 times a day. But it's just that he's protecting them. And he walks us all the way through. Then there's like this special thing to get into the door. And I'm like, if I feel this way, how are they feeling coming to work every day? And it's still happening. The anniversary will be June 28th. And they still have that same security, that same way through the door every day. And that's been really tough for them. And we ended up moving forward about, was it 4 weeks?
Maybe 6 weeks, maybe a little bit longer.
We did a debrief with everybody that wanted to.
But for the survivors, they were all there. So they had been inseparable for weeks. Right after it happened, they were all together all the time. But it wasn't until we did a debriefing with them that they put everything together. And you could see it in their faces, and you could see it just, and it was magical, because there was, as Jeff talks about the different puzzle pieces, they had been together, but they still were missing puzzle. Each one of their puzzles was missing those pieces. And they asked us questions, and some of them I was able to find that they didn't know the answers to. We could go and ask and get answers for that were really helpful for them. I could call up the lieutenant in charge of homicide and to say, if I can know this, I can tell them, let me know, and he gave us information that I could give them that was helpful for them in processing, because they were missing those pieces.
They were waking up in the middle of the night stuck. Like they'd get to a point and then they couldn't remember. And the biggest one was probably the guy that I told you that we found running, that we helped. He panicked and he ran and he was losing time and he just couldn't put anything together, and that was what he was struggling with. So when we get in the room and everybody's going through their part, we were filling gaps, and I mean, we'd stop in the middle and so-and-so would be like, "That's where you were? Oh, okay," because I was wondering, because I was here, and you know, and just listening to them have that conversation, it was like 2 hours long, and then at the end there was like this sigh of relief that I hadn't, I mean, I've done a ton of these, but seeing them put those pieces together allowed them, and then what we did is we kind of just sat, let everybody get up and do their own thing, and then we get this mostly in police departments, but they circled back around and people came in and individually one-on-one kind of came in and sat and talked with one of us. We ended up kind of in separate rooms for a while talking, but it was really beneficial for them, and I really think it helped close some of those gaps for them that they just didn't have answers to.
Then we did another one for all the employees who were not there, but were employees of the Capital Gazette. And that was important, going through, and we modified the debriefing for them about where were they when it happened. Because we know they weren't there, some of them were on vacation. I mean, I can tell you, so Rick, the editor, he was on vacation, he came back with his kids right away. One of the things I didn't say we did for him at the scene, he's sending his kids home. First, they drive right to the scene. Well, what's the biggest fear he has? Is there someone at my house waiting for my kids? So as a lieutenant, I can call and say, I need 2 patrolmen to escort these kids to their house and go through their house to make sure their house is secure and safe for them. That was a big relief for he and his wife. And for the children. I mean, I say children, they're older teenagers. So 5 months afterwards, Jeff Mitchell did a briefing with the officers that wanted to be there for the entire incident. And it was really helpful for them. And us, because it let us really realize things that's where it really hit us hard, that the officers that next morning were not ready emotionally or physically to be at work, nevertheless to have a debriefing.
And he also came out a month after the incident to debrief myself and my staff. I could never find the right point in time to do it because we were constantly at funerals. There was a huge memorial at a big downtown Annapolis hotel, which just every time just resurfaced for us everything. You know, so we did that Friday or Monday, we kind of kept regrouping and talking, but we really never debriefed. And so making sure that we did that piece when everybody was ready and we could finally move on. Because I felt like we just kept reliving it because we'd go to a memorial or we'd go to the big memorial, and the next thing you know, I'm back talking to the guy who wrote the initial article that got his friends killed and the guilt that he still has for that, and then you're meeting with a family. So we had to wait for the right time to finally to do it for our staff. So before that time, we were checking in with each other regularly and making sure, or I'd come in one day and I'd say to Debbie, tag you're it, like today I need to go on just a normal call. Can I go on a normal call? Can you check on these guys? The one other thing I did, fast forward to that Monday after the event, is I assigned each family to a staff member. So everybody had someone, whether they were the survivor in the room or a family of the deceased, got somebody so that we could spread out that piece of feeling overwhelmed. So, which was great because as we fast forward 5 months, 6 months into it, people are still checking in with that one clinician and they feel like they've got that go-to person for everyone. And I highly recommend that when you get into these events that you don't try to carry that load, but find someone for each set of family. And I actually learned that from Newtown. When I was in one of the trainings, they talk about how they had an officer for each family that stayed with that family. That's kind of the mindset I got for this, even though it was a smaller piece, was could I do the same thing here to make sure that people aren't overloaded and the family is sharing something, you're not getting a new clinician coming in and then repeating that again. And that's been really helpful.
Our lessons learned that we talked about already as we went through. And that's Jen and I's information.
And I guess I just want to open it up for questions or, yes?
I have a question for each of you. 5 months after the briefing, and I totally understand because, you know, when this kind of stuff happens, it's constant. What did you do for yourself?
So, this happened in July, and I will be honest, I canceled my family on vacation without me because I spent the entire summer dealing with families and situations. So we made a pact that in January we took an unplugged family vacation with no connection to anything. I know that's far out, but that's when I was ready. I always say I can't get that summer back, but the fact that I did need to do something to unplug, and I made sure to do that in January. My husband was really good about it. But what you don't realize is when you're in it, and you blink and you're 3 months in it, and you're still meeting with people. And, I mean, you're looking at our timeline, you know, 6 weeks out, we're still just finishing up memorials and this and that, and, you know, 2 months out, and we're finally and we're visiting them pretty regularly at their makeshift office, which they're still at. I didn't feel right stepping back from that. So at some point, you just have to take a breath and go, okay, now what do I do for myself? And I think that came about October, honestly, when I could finally regroup and say, this is it, because what we didn't talk a lot about is several of us are real in tune with the officers. We started dealing a lot with officer pieces and started coming up that needed help. And that's why I say you have to keep checking in. We did those regular debriefs, but that 5-month debrief was key. It was for those first people in when they were ready. So I think we all weren't really ready until probably October, November. So for me, it was unplugging for a little while and regrouping. And it was too far out, but it's what we could do.
So for me, what I didn't say, my father-in-law died the week before. Michelle and I talked Thursday. When the incident was over, I was planning, or since the incident, when I got done teaching, I was taking everything back to the office. I was going to the house, and my wife, my kids, and my mother-in-law were going to the beach for a long weekend, and I was supposed to be off the next week for 4th of July, and we were going to be camping the whole week. So she's calling her husband saying, I don't know. I'm calling my wife saying, I don't think I'm going to the beach tonight, and I'll let you know what's going on. I worked through the weekend, actually. I didn't work on Sunday. I talked to Jen on the phone. I think Monday, Tuesday I worked. I went to my campground, and I have a camper in Rock Hall right on the bay, so I was there with my family then. But then my vacations, my best friend lives in Miami, so we went down for his 50th birthday in September, and then we went to Key West for my 50th in October. So I had my relaxation time, but it's helpfful because for me as police, being in an office with all clinicians, we debrief all the time. We really do. And Steve knows I'll call him if I need to talk, or I call Jen, I call Michelle, and so that's how we take care of ourselves that way and try to.
But what I will tell you, the most important thing we did when we got back to house and we did those spreadsheets, I looked at him and it was 1 a.m. and I said, the best thing I can do for myself right now is run home. My socks, I could bring them out. I just wanted to, I had a shower at the office, but I wanted to go home, and I said, let's take an hour, let's run home and shower. And what I did was I ran home, I didn't want to lay down, I showered, put a fresh uniform on, grabbed the food out of my fridge, got back in the car, and drove back to the office about 3:30 in the morning. I didn't sleep, I didn't do anything, husband as worried as he must have been, didn't realize I had kind of come home. But I needed to just go home and change for myself because I just felt like the incident was all over you, know, and I just wanted to freshen up. amazing how much better you feel just taking that hour and doing that. So always tell people when you get to that point that you can take a breath and you're regrouping, make sure you regroup yourself, because showering, sitting down for a second, getting a bite to eat is key. And for us, we did that and then regrouped back at the office again, and I think we were better for it, honestly.
And on the Tuesday immediately after, Victor came and did a diffusing with us, of all of us that were involved. That was really, really helpful. Any other questions?
I just have, you said earlier about waiting for the EOC. Are you talking, was that your city or town EOC?
Yeah, our county.
Your county EOC.
So we have that, all, you know, everybody's got that war room with all the phones and the desks, and every specialty comes in. And I just guess I always thought people were always there. I don't know.
You're right, it does take a while.
I swear in TV that happens, right? But realistically, I think in my mind, as soon as that call went out, and I mean, we got 450 officers standing on Bestgate Road. How can we not have 10 people at EOC to answer phones? What I did realize is the people that are at EOC are not equipped to answer a phone.
And they're strategic.
And they're strategic. So they're able to shut down roads. Yeah, so what they're doing, in hindsight, me, the clinician, not realizing this, they're shutting down roads, they're opening roads, they've got the cameras up, they're doing everything there. What they needed to do is get the people who were equipped to answer those panic phone calls, and that's what wasn't ready. And that's what, we now have these timelines that, you know, when you do this tabletop exercises and you look out and you go, what are we doing at 30 minutes out, an hour out, 2 hours out? What's realistic in getting someone to answer phones at the EOC? And that's what we're playing out now for that piece.
And my other question is, did you police service have a victim services group, or you guys don't have victim services?
Really, that's us.
Oh, that's you.
The
Okay.
state's attorney's office does. So we worked with them, with the deceased family members.
Oh.
And that's, I mean, trying to help them as much as we can now. And now, I mean, the trial, it's, Ramos, the defendant, is claimed criminally not responsible. So they're going to be going through all those procedures.
And I'll tell you the big thing we're dealing with right now, so now they just moved the trial again, of course, you know, that's going to happen to November. So the debate we're having right now is you've got, people have seen the video, so it's on video of the office. And some people have seen it, some people have not. And now we're dealing, each clinician that's with a family are arguing because they want to be in the courtroom, but they already have a picture of how their loved one died, and they don't know if they want to change that picture in their mind, and the understanding that during court the video could be shown. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. And there's going to be play-by-play as they are, you know, trying to prosecute this guy, and do the families want to sit in that courtroom? And they keep changing their mind. So it's like reliving it all over with the trial. It's like opening that wound fresh again. So we are trying to figure out, you know, how do we do this as the year anniversary comes out? How do we do this again in November when the staff are going to want to be in the courtroom, the families are going to be in the courtroom, some don't want to hear it. Are you going to take them outside while that part's going on? How do we protect them from the media? How do we protect them from all that? So these are all things that just kind of reopen those wounds, and it feels like it's kind of just starting up again for us.
So,
Any other questions?
any other questions? We have 10 minutes. I can show the video that we created. And
Since they spent all that time making the sound work?
no, this one was good from the get-go.
No, I mean the speaker this morning.
Anne Arundel County and the city of Annapolis are heartbroken. On Thursday, June 28th, an individual entered the newsroom of the Capital Gazette newspaper and took 5 innocent lives. At times like this, words cannot capture adequately the thoughts and raw emotions that are running through the community in the wake of this senseless violence that has repeated itself once again. But I've asked Dr. George Everly to join me to talk about the impact that incidents such as this can have on our community, in the hope that an open discussion might just foster the healing process. Dr. Everly has studied terrorism and disasters for over 40 years in more than 30 different countries around the world. He's also a county resident. So, Dr. Everly, what are some of the most common reactions people might be experiencing?
There are actually a number of reactions that I've seen across the world time after time. Confusion is one of them. We ask ourselves, how could something like this happen? How could it happen here? These are things that happen to other people, other places. It doesn't happen here. So when it happens here, it brings it home, and we're confused. Confusion sometimes leads to fear. Pretty common reaction. We wonder if it's safe to go out. Can we go shopping? Should we send our children to school? Should we even leave our homes? And I think frustration is a common theme also. We feel out of control. We ask ourselves, couldn't something have been done to prevent this? Sadly, there's sometimes a tendency to blame people and things and institutions. And that's just an act of frustration. We want to think it can be prevented. We fear for our children. We have a deep sense of loss, especially needless loss. With our children, is it safe to send them to school? What lessons are they learning? This is a time when children need reassurance, especially from their parents. One of the things I also see, sadly, is anger. We just don't know what to do with our frustration. We don't know what to do with our confusion and our fear, and fear turns into anger. But we don't want someone else's violence to be a trigger for our own fear and violent reactions. We don't want to allow that to trigger destructive anger in ourselves and our community.
All that being said, what things buffer a community? What things can help a community become more resilient?
Study after study, our science is very clear. The single most powerful factor is people sticking together, the support of other people, collaboration, cohesion in a community. Communities that are cohesive not only bounce back, they're not only resilient, but they come back stronger. We need to focus on the things that we share. We need to collaborate. We can't focus on the things that divide us, especially at times like this. Open, honest communication is really critical. There's no such thing as an information vacuum. If we're not leading, if we're not speaking, someone else is, especially in this era of social media. Mm-hmm. Leadership is important. I congratulate you for doing this. This is important. You'd be surprised how many times community leaders fail to step up in the moment they're most needed to provide direction. If change is necessary to reduce the risk of future violence, then we need to do that. We can never be complacent. Violence can't be the new normal. Fostering access to mental health services is very important. We must remove the hesitation, and we must remove the stigma that's often associated with seeking out those services. I think we also have to resist the temptation to pursue a myriad of feel-good, overly simplistic solutions. These are complex times, complex problems. They need deliberation from all sides. Once we do that deliberation, we must move forward. Lastly, we can't live in fear. We can't let someone else's anger, someone else's violence inhibit the way we live our lives. By doing so, if we were to fall into that trap, we actually give control of our lives to those people who would do us harm.
Dr. Everly, thank you very much for joining us today and offering a measure of solace to people who are struggling with this tragedy.
Thank you, Steve.
If you or a loved one needs help, don't hesitate to call our warm line that is staffed 24 hours per day.
It did go away, and our call line on mobile for mental health did go up after this incident. So, of course, the number gets out there, people are concerned, see something, say something. So our volume for a while does get raised, when you have an incident like this, so.
And we're getting, I hate to say it, we're getting better. We had, and I'll call it an active assailant, a month ago, I guess now, on the 15th of April, person waited outside his apartment building, shot one of his neighbors, threatened to shoot 2 other neighbors. We were there within 20 minutes working with the EOC now and getting the resources that we need, and we're getting better and getting better lines of communication to get everything that we need up front instead of afterwards.
But making sure what we're doing right is after every incident, we're meeting back with the EOC, the heads, and figuring out what we can do better. And like this last one, there was still a breakdown somewhere. So we regrouped and we said, plan works to phase 2, level A, but then whoop, we need another spot. And so those are the things that kind of, if I encourage you to do anything, is when you run these things, is improve, improve, improve. So,
Well,
thank you.
Thank
Enjoy.
you.
What's the number?
Oh, the number, I'm sorry.